First, your car will come to an end. Then, so will you.
The pregnancy test sitting on my kitchen counter wasn't mine. Neither were the Viagra pills I'd found in my wife's purse 3 days earlier, hidden beneath her lipstick and breath mints like dirty little secrets waiting to explode. My name's Ray Malinsky, and I run a used car lot on the east side of Millfield, Ohio, a town that's been dying slower than a rusted-out transmission since the steel mill closed 15 years ago. I've been married to Beth for 12 years, and until last week I thought we had something resembling a decent life. A modest house with peeling paint, a 13-year-old daughter named Carrie, and enough money to keep the lights on and food on the table. Then I found those pills. "Ray, you home?" Beth's voice echoed from the front door, keys jangling against the wooden frame. I quickly shoved the pregnancy test back where I'd found it, behind the coffee canister, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. The Budweiser felt cold against my palm, a small comfort in what was shaping up to be the worst week of my life. "In here!" I called back, settling into my recliner and clicking on the television. Some mindless sitcom filled the screen, canned laughter mocking the silence that had grown between Beth and me over the past few months. Beth walked into the living room, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the same black slacks and white blouse she wore to her job at Morrison's bookstore downtown. She looked tired, but there was something else in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Hard to tell the difference anymore. "How was work?" I asked, taking a long pull from my beer. "Fine, same as always." She avoided my gaze, busying herself with straightening magazines on the coffee table that didn't need straightening. "Mrs. Morrison's thinking about expanding the children's section. That right?" "Yeah, she thinks it'll bring in more families." I nodded, watching her fidget with the remote control, then the throw pillows, then her wedding ring, always moving, always avoiding eye contact. Classic signs of someone hiding something, and after 20 years in the car business, I'd learned to read people pretty well. "Beth." "What?" "Look at me." She finally met my eyes, and I saw it clearly, the guilt she'd been carrying around like a lead weight. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Everything okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Strange how?" Her voice pitched higher, defensive. "I don't know. Distant, like your mind's somewhere else." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I'm just tired, Ray. Work's been stressful, and Carrie's been having trouble with her math homework, and the house needs so many repairs we can't afford. I found something today." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Beth's hands stopped moving, and she stared at me with the expression of someone who'd just been caught stealing. "Found what?" I could have confronted her right then, could have pulled out the pregnancy test and demanded an explanation, but something held me back. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need to see how deep this rabbit hole went. "Nothing important," I said finally. "Just some old receipts." Relief flooded her face, and she actually smiled. "Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to start dinner. Carrie should be home from soccer practice soon." She hurried toward the kitchen, and I heard her rummaging through cabinets, probably looking for the pregnancy test. The sound of her panic was almost satisfying. My phone buzzed with a text message. Anna, my lot manager, checking in about a problem with one of our suppliers. Anna Chen had been working for me for 3 years, ever since her husband died in a construction accident. She was reliable, honest, and one of the few people in this town I actually trusted. "Got it handled?" I texted back. "See you tomorrow." But as I sat there, listening to Beth clatter around the kitchen and thinking about those Viagra pills, I realized trust was becoming a luxury I couldn't afford. Over the next 2 days, I started paying attention, really paying attention, to the way Beth's phone buzzed at odd hours and how she'd quickly flip it face down when I walked into the room, to how she'd started working late 3 nights a week, something she'd never done in the 11 years she'd been at Morrison's, to the new underwear I'd glimpsed in the laundry basket, black lace that definitely wasn't for my benefit. Thursday evening, while Beth was in the shower, her phone lit up with a text message. The preview showed just enough to send a chill down my spine. "T, tonight was incredible. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow." T, someone whose name started with T, had been having incredible nights with my wife. I thought about the men in Beth's orbit. Her boss, Mr. Morrison, was 73 and walked with a cane. Her coworker Janet was definitely not a T. That left customers, neighbors, or someone I didn't know about. Friday morning, I called in sick to the lot and followed Beth to work. She drove her Honda Civic through downtown, past the empty storefronts and boarded-up buildings that made Millfield look like a ghost town, and parked behind Morrison's just like she did every day. But instead of going inside, she sat in her car for 10 minutes, texting someone. Then a red Mustang pulled up beside her, a late-model GT with racing stripes and chrome wheels that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. The driver was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of build that screamed gym membership and the kind of confidence that screamed a-hole. He had sandy brown hair, a square jaw, and when he smiled at my wife through his rolled-down window, I wanted to punch his teeth in. Beth got out of her car and leaned against his door, laughing at something he said. Then she reached through the window and touched his face, a gentle, intimate gesture that hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. So this was T. I sat in my truck, parked across the street behind a dumpster, and watched my wife flirt with another man in broad daylight. They talked for maybe 5 minutes before she finally went into the bookstore and he drove away, engine rumbling like thunder. That afternoon, I stopped by Hannigan's Bar, a dive on the south side where the beer was cheap and the gossip was cheaper. The regulars were already there: Jimmy Kowalski, who used to work the mill before it closed, Maria Santos, who cleaned offices downtown, and Big Eddie Torino, who ran numbers for guys from Cleveland. Ray! Jimmy waved me over to the bar. Haven't seen you in here for weeks. How's business? Can't complain. I ordered a beer and settled onto a bar stool that had seen better decades. You guys know anything about a red Mustang around town? Guy driving its maybe late 20s, built like a linebacker? Oh, that's Tommy Geller, Maria said, not looking up from her whiskey. Works part-time at Peterson's garage. Thinks he's God's gift to women. Tommy. T for Tommy. Real piece of work, that one, Big Eddie added. Always bragging about his conquests, you know? Last week he was in here telling anyone who'd listen about some married woman he's been seeing. Real proud of himself. My grip tightened on my beer bottle. Married woman? Yeah, said she was older, classy, married to some loser who didn't appreciate her. Eddie shook his head in disgust. Kids got no respect. In my day, you mess with another man's wife, you end up in the hospital. Or the morgue, Jimmy muttered. I finished my beer and left a 10 on the bar. Thanks for the drinks, guys. Ray, you okay? Maria asked. You look a little green around the gills. Just tired. Long day. But as I walked back to my truck, my mind was racing. Tommy Geller, part-time mechanic, red Mustang, bragging about sleeping with my wife to anyone who'd listen. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Beth, listening to her breathe, wondering how long this had been going on and how many people in town knew about it. The thought of walking into Hannigan's or the diner or even my own car lot and seeing pity in people's eyes made me sick. Around 3 a.m, Beth's phone buzzed. She was sleeping, but the screen lit up the dark room like a beacon. T, missing you already? Tomorrow night? I stared at the ceiling until dawn, planning. Saturday morning, I drove to Peterson's garage. It was a small operation. 2 bays, an office that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Carter administration, and a parking lot full of cars in various states of repair. Tommy's Mustang was parked near the office, gleaming in the morning sun like a red middle finger. I found a parking spot across the street and waited. Around 10:30, Tommy emerged from one of the bays, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He was exactly as I'd pictured him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of cocky swagger that probably made certain women weak in the knees. He got into his Mustang and drove off, and I followed at a distance. Tommy's first stop was the bank, then the grocery store, then a small apartment complex on Maple Street. He parked in front of a 2-story building that had seen better decades and disappeared inside. I waited 15 minutes, then walked up to the mailboxes by the front door. T. Geller, App 2B was written in faded black marker. So now I knew where he lived. Over the next few days, I learned Tommy's routine. He worked Tuesday through Thursday at Peterson's, spent most evenings at Hannigan's or cruising around town in his Mustang, and apparently met my wife every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at various locations around Millfield. I also started making my own plans. First, I visited the bank and moved most of our joint savings into a new account that only I could access. Not enough to be illegal, just enough to make Beth's life complicated if she decided to leave. Second, I stopped by the post office and had our mail forwarded to a P.O. box. If Beth was planning to run off with Tommy, she'd have to do it without access to our financial information. Third, I bought a small GPS tracker from an electronics store in the next town over, the kind repo men use to keep tabs on cars they might need to reclaim. Wednesday evening, while Tommy was inside Hannigan's bragging about his latest conquest, I attached the tracker to the underside of his Mustang's rear bumper. It took less than 30 seconds, and nobody saw me do it. Now I could monitor his movements from my phone. Thursday night, Beth told me she had to work late again. Inventory, she said, not meeting my eyes. Mrs. Morrison wants everything counted and cataloged by Monday. That's a lot of work for just you and Janet. Janet's sick. It's just me. I nodded and kissed her cheek, tasting the lie on her skin. Don't work too hard. She left around 7, and I immediately checked the GPS tracker on my phone. Tommy's Mustang was moving through downtown, heading toward the old industrial district where the abandoned factories cast long shadows over empty parking lots. I grabbed my keys and followed the signal. I found them at the Sunset Motel, a rundown place on the edge of town that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. Tommy's Mustang was parked outside room 12, and through the thin curtains, I could see shadows moving against the lamplight. My wife and her lover, playing house in a place that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching that window, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. It was a public humiliation. How many people had seen Beth's Honda parked outside the Sunset Motel? How many knew exactly what was happening in room 12? Around 10 o'clock, the door opened and Beth emerged, smoothing down her skirt and checking her reflection in the window. Tommy followed, grabbing her and saying something that made her laugh. They kissed goodbye like teenagers, all hands and tongues and complete disregard for who might be watching. Then Beth got in her Honda and drove home, probably planning to tell me all about her exhausting evening of inventory management. I waited until she was gone, then walked across the parking lot to Tommy's Mustang. The car was unlocked. Apparently, Tommy was as careless as he was cocky. I popped the hood and loosened the oil drain plug just enough to create a slow leak. Not enough to cause immediate damage, but enough to ruin his engine if he didn't notice the problem soon enough. Then I took out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side door, leaving a long, deep scratch in the pristine red paint. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Friday evening, Beth announced she was going out with Janet. "Girls' night," she said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "We're going to see that new romantic comedy at the theater." The GPS tracker told a different story. Tommy's Mustang was heading toward Miller's Point, a scenic overlook where teenagers went to make out and married women apparently went to betray their husbands. This time I didn't just watch. I parked my truck at the bottom of the hill and climbed up through the woods, staying in the shadows until I reached the edge of the parking area. Tommy's Mustang was there, windows fogged, rocking gently on its suspension. I could hear them through the thin metal. Beth's voice, breathless and urgent, saying things to Tommy that she hadn't said to me in years. My hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, I seriously considered dragging Tommy out of that car and beating him senseless. But that would have been stupid. Attack charges, divorce court, custody battles, all the legal complications that would destroy my life while leaving Tommy free to laugh about it. Instead, I took out my phone and started recording. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. Beth's voice, unmistakable, telling Tommy how much she loved him, how she was going to leave me as soon as she figured out the logistics, how they could be together without sneaking around. "What about Ray?" Tommy's voice, muffled but audible. "Ray's a loser," Beth replied. "He'll never amount to anything more than a used car salesman in a dead-end town. You and I, we could go anywhere, do anything. And the kid? Carrie will understand eventually. She's smart. She'll see that we're better off without him." I stopped recording and walked back to my truck, the weight of their betrayal settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. It wasn't just adultery. It was a complete dismantling of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. Saturday morning, I called Anna and asked her to handle the lot for the weekend. "Everything okay, Ray?" she asked. "You sound tired." "Just need to take care of some personal business." "Anything I can help with?" Anna was a good friend, but this wasn't her problem. "Thanks, but I've got it handled." I spent the morning at the public library, using their computers to research divorce law in Ohio. Community property, custody arrangements, alimony calculations, all the legal ammunition I might need if this situation exploded. I also looked up Tommy Geller's background. High school dropout, 2 DUI arrests, currently behind on child support payments to an ex-girlfriend in Akron. Real winner, my wife had picked. Around noon, I drove to Morrison's bookstore. Beth was working, arranging displays and helping customers with that fake smile she'd perfected over the years. She looked up when I walked in and her face went pale. "Ray, what are you doing here? Can a husband visit his wife at work?" "Of course, but I was thinking we should talk tonight. About us. About our future." The fake smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's been a while since we really talked. You know, about what we want, where we're going." I picked up a paperback romance novel from a nearby display and flipped through it absently. "Sometimes I feel like we're strangers living in the same house." "Ray, I'm working. I know. I just wanted you to know that I love you, Beth. Whatever problems we've been having, I want to work them out." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Okay, sure. We can talk tonight." "Good. I'll pick up dinner from Romano's. We can eat after Carrie goes to bed." I kissed her cheek and left, satisfied by the confusion and guilt in her eyes. Let her spend the afternoon wondering what I knew and what I was planning. That evening, I set the table with our good china and lit candles like it was our anniversary. Beth came downstairs wearing a blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas, looking nervous and beautiful and guilty as heck. "This is nice," she said, sitting across from me. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to have dinner with my wife?" We ate in relative silence, making small talk about Carrie's soccer season and the weather and anything except the elephant in the room. Finally, after Carrie had gone upstairs to do homework, I poured 2 glasses of wine and settled back in my chair. "Beth, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. "Okay. Are you happy? I mean, really happy with our life together?" "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "Because lately it feels like you're somewhere else, like your mind is on other things, other people." The color drained from her face. "Ray, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Miller's Point. Beth's voice filled the dining room, crystal clear and damning. "Ray's a loser. He'll never amount to anything more than a used car salesman in a dead-end town." Beth's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, red wine spreading across the hardwood like a dark stain of betrayal. "Ray, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been screwing Tommy Geller for the past 3 months? Can you explain why you've been telling him you want to leave me and take Carrie with you?" She started crying, big dramatic sobs that might have moved me 6 months ago. Now they just made me angry. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're having an affair with a 28-year-old mechanic who drives a red Mustang and lives in a crap-hole apartment on Maple Street." Her crying stopped abruptly. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been watching you, Beth, following you, learning about your new boyfriend and his charming personality." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you know he's behind on child support? Did you know he's been bragging to everyone at Hannigan's about nailing a married woman? Stop it. Did you know he's been calling you his sugar mama because you've been paying for those motel rooms? Stop!" She stood up so fast her chair fell backward, and for a moment I thought she might hit me. Instead, she just stood there, shaking with rage and humiliation. "You bastard," she whispered. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." "Protecting yourself from what?" "From being made a fool of in my own town. From losing everything I've worked for to a punk kid who thinks he's hit the jackpot." Beth wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I want a divorce." "No." "What do you mean, no?" I stood up and walked around the table until I was inches from her face. "I mean, no, Beth. You don't get to cheat on me, humiliate me, plan to steal my daughter, and then walk away with half of everything I've built. You can't stop me from getting a divorce." "Maybe not. But I can make it expensive. I can make it public. I can make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of woman you are." Her face went white. "You wouldn't—" "Try me." We stared at each other across the ruins of our marriage, and I saw the moment she realized I wasn't the same man she'd married. I wasn't the pushover she could manipulate and control. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to end it with Tommy, tonight. I want you to tell him it's over, and I want you to mean it. And if I do, then maybe we can work this out. Maybe we can save our marriage." It was a lie, of course. There was no saving this marriage. But I needed time to plan, to prepare, to make sure that when this whole thing collapsed, I'd be the one left standing. Beth nodded slowly. Okay, I'll call him. No, you'll go see him in person, and you'll tell him that if he ever contacts you again, I'll make his life very unpleasant. Ray, do it, Beth, or I'll do it for you, and trust me, you won't like my approach. She grabbed her purse and car keys, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. I'll be back in an hour. Take your time. Make sure he understands. After she left, I poured myself another glass of wine and started planning the next phase of my revenge. Because that's what this was now. Not a marriage reconciliation, but a carefully orchestrated campaign of retribution. Tommy Geller had picked the wrong man's wife to seduce, and Beth had picked the wrong man to betray. Beth came home 3 hours later, her eyes red from crying and her dress wrinkled like she'd been in a fight. She found me in the living room, watching television and drinking beer like nothing had happened. It's done, she said quietly. I told him it was over. Good. How'd he take it? How do you think he took it? He was angry. He said some things. What kind of things? She hesitated. He said he was going to talk to you, man to man. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. I look forward to that conversation. Over the next few days, Beth tried to pretend everything was normal. She went to work, came home at reasonable hours, and made an effort to be the wife she'd stopped being months ago. But I could see the strain in her face, the way she jumped every time her phone buzzed, the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Wednesday evening, Tommy finally made his move. I was closing up the lot when his red Mustang pulled into the parking area, engine rumbling like an angry beast. He got out wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off his gym-built physique, walking toward me with the kind of swagger that suggested he thought this was going to be easy. You Ray Malinsky? That's right, you must be Tommy. Yeah, I'm Tommy. He stopped about 6 feet away, hands on his hips, trying to look intimidating. We need to talk. About what? About Beth. About you interfering in something that's none of your business. I set down the clipboard I'd been holding and gave him my full attention. None of my business. She's my wife, kid. Maybe on paper, but she doesn't love you anymore. She told me so herself. Did she? That's interesting because she also told you it was over between you two. Funny how quickly love dies, isn't it? His confident expression faltered slightly. She only said that because you threatened her, but she'll come back to me. She knows I can give her things you never could. Like what? A crappy apartment and a car that's falling apart? My car's not falling apart. I pointed to the long scratch on his driver's side door. You might want to get that looked at. And while you're at it, check your oil. I noticed a puddle under your car when you parked. Tommy's face went red as he realized I was responsible for the damage. You son of a witch. That's the problem with young guys like you, I said, walking closer. You think you're untouchable. You think you can take whatever you want without consequences. I didn't take anything. Beth came to me. Because you seduced her. Because you saw a lonely married woman and thought, easy target. It wasn't like that. Sure it was. You probably told her she was beautiful, that she deserved better, that her husband didn't appreciate her. Real original stuff, Romeo. Tommy's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I also know that you've been bragging about her to everyone at Hannigan's, calling her your sugar mama because she paid for those motel rooms. That's not true. Maria Santos heard you say it. So did Big Eddie and half the regular crowd. My wife's reputation is ruined because of your big mouth. Look, man, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now you're going to fix it. Tommy straightened up, trying to reclaim his tough guy persona. I'm not going to do anything. Beth's a grown woman who can make her own choices. Not anymore. See, Beth and I had a long talk, and we've decided to work on our marriage. That means you're out of the picture permanently. She'll change her mind. No, she won't. Because if you ever contact her again, if you ever come near her or my family, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of some documents I'd found through my research. Child support payments, Tommy. You owe your ex-girlfriend in Akron $8,000. What do you think happens when I send her your current address and employment information? His face went pale. You can't do that. I can and I will. I'll also make sure your boss at Peterson's knows about your DUI arrests, and I'll make sure everyone at Hannigan's knows that the tough guy who was bragging about his conquest got dumped by a married woman who decided her loser husband was a better bet. You bastard. Maybe. But I'm a bastard who's protecting his family. You're just a punk who got in over his head. Tommy took a step forward, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to fight me. But I'd been working with my hands for 20 years, and despite his gym muscles, he was still just a kid who'd never been in a real fight. Walk away, Tommy. Find some other woman to chase. But stay away from mine. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back to his Mustang. The engine coughed and sputtered when he tried to start it. Apparently, the oil leak was worse than I'd thought. You might want to call a tow truck, I called out as he finally got the car running. That engine sounds pretty rough. He drove away without another word, trailing a thin line of smoke. The next morning, I got a call from Anna. Ray, you need to get down here. There's been some trouble. I found her in the office, looking worried and holding a piece of paper. What's wrong? Someone vandalized 3 of the cars on the lot last night, keyed the paint, slashed tires, broke windows, and they left this. She handed me a note written in block letters. Stay away from my girl or next time it'll be worse. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Call the insurance company and call the police. You know who did this? I've got a pretty good idea. But when the police arrived, Tommy was nowhere to be found. His apartment was empty, his job at Peterson's abandoned, and his red Mustang was discovered 3 days later in a ditch outside Akron, burned down to the frame. Looks like your boyfriend skipped town, I told Beth that evening over dinner. She didn't respond, just pushed food around her plate and avoided eye contact. He left you a goodbye present, though. Vandalized my lot before he ran. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. What do you want me to say, Ray? That I'm a terrible person? That I ruined everything? Fine. I'm a terrible person who ruined everything. I want you to say you're going to be a better wife and mother from now on. I want you to say you're going to earn back my trust. And if I can't, I reached across the table and took her hand. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a gesture of love and forgiveness, but my grip was firm enough to make her wince. Then you'll lose everything, Beth. The house, Carrie, your reputation, your future. Because I'll make sure everyone knows what you did and who you did it with. She pulled her hand away and rubbed her wrist. You've changed. No, I've just stopped being stupid. 3 months later, Beth moved out anyway. She filed for divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences, and tried to get custody of Carrie and half of everything I owned. But I was ready for her. The recording from Miller's Point became evidence of her adultery. The financial records I'd carefully preserved showed her spending marital assets on her affair. The testimony from the regulars at Hannigan's established a pattern of public humiliation that damaged my reputation and business. In the end, Beth got a small settlement and supervised visitation with Carrie. No alimony, no house, no car lot, no happy ending with her young lover who disappeared like smoke. I kept everything that mattered. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was having a beer at Hannigan's when Maria Santos sat down next to me. You hear about Tommy Geller? She asked. Can't say that I have. Heard he's working at a car wash in Akron, living with his baby mama in a trailer park. That right? Yeah. Apparently his ex tracked him down after someone sent her his information. Now he's paying child support and working for minimum wage. I finished my beer and left a 10 on the bar. Funny how life works out. Ray? Yeah? That was some ice-cold revenge, what you did to those two. I looked at her in the mirror behind the bar, seeing my own reflection staring back, older, harder, but satisfied. I always said I'd make the last payment on this house, I replied. Turns out, the house was never the problem.